Hey everyone and welcome to another video, guys, and today we're going to be breaking down the patch 10.24 notes, and at the very end of the video I'm going to share with you guys my current take on the mid lane tier list, breaking down what I believe to be strong, weak, and then also highlight some champions that I think have a lot of potential moving on into the future. So diving straight in, there's a lot to cover here. The first champion on the chopping block is Amumu. Now, I'm sure all of you at one point in time on patch 10.23 have experienced the very oppressive nature of Amumu, so it looks like they're reducing the damage over time on the W ability, just the base damage as well as the damage ratio, which is very fitting and very warranted in my opinion. Now, one thing we do need to understand about Amumu's, I would say, rise in priority is that it feels like to me that the champion itself isn't really good. It's more about how Amumu's kit just interacts with the new items, which says to me this champion very much is just a flavor of the month pick and won't really last throughout the changes as soon as like items like Sunfire Aegis get really balanced. Now, I have gotten asked a lot within my Discord, what are my thoughts on tanks on the current patch? I believe they're much more viable than they were in the end of Season 10 for two reasons. So one, I would say Sunfire Aegis as an item itself is quite strong because of the damage from Immolate and things like that, and it just feels really nice to buy. So I think that, you know, that's one element of why we're seeing a lot more of like Amumu, Maokai, Ornn, and things like that, and a lot of these tankier champions. But then I would say the second part of it is that we're seeing a lot of burst champions. And we're seeing a lot of burst champions in the current meta because of the buffs or the introduction of items like the Rocket Belt, as well as the Night Harvester item, as well as buffs to Lich Brain, which is traditionally a very burst-oriented item. So I think tanks overall are quite effective because of these two reasons. So it'll be interesting to see the effectiveness of tanks over time, given the changes to the Sunfire Aegis as an item, as well as the meta shift over time, and maybe we're just going to see less burst, but we'll see. But that's my current thought on and take on it anyway. But now the next champion is Hecarim. Now, I'm not a jungler, so I'm actually not too sure about how these changes to the passive and the E actually affect his level of threat in terms of overall gank threat, as well as clearing. But and to me, from a mid laner's perspective, it didn't seem to me that Hecarim was overly oppressive. Like, yes, it was a strong solo queue jungler, but it seemed to me like it had a lot of counterplay. So I'm quite unsure about why they made these changes. But anyway, they've decided to, on the passive, bonus movement speed to bonus damage, they've reduced the conversion, and then the E bonus movement speed decreased later in bug fix. So it'll be interesting to see how this affects Hecarim's priority within the jungle meta, but I'm not the right person to really give you a great analysis of this change. Now for one of the more interesting changes on this patch, and this is actually with Kayle. Now on patch 10.23, I believe Kayle to be in the top 3 of the most strong mid champions on that patch. And this is actually because of 3 main reasons. Number 1, the buff she received on patch 10.23. Number 2, the changes of Nash's. And number 3, because of the introduction of Riff Maker as an item. Now, on patch 10.23, she received a buff in which she gains bonus attack speed per ability power. And to be more specific, it was 2% per 100 ability power. Now, that's getting shifted to 1% per 100 ability power. Now, the reason this was relevant is because of how easy it was for Kayle to get a bulk amount of attack speed through the ease of ability power through Nash's. Because Nash's, like in my previous itemization video, how I explained that item got thinned out, where they removed its CDR, gave it a very clear identity, where it's just pure damage. A lot of attack speed, a lot of ability power, and more damage on the passive. So what this actually meant for Kayle was that even if you died once or twice or even 3 times in the early game, as soon as you get to Nash's, the spike you get because of the buff to the passive, as well as the ability power you're getting from Nash's and the attack speed, you just do way too much damage and you spike incredibly hard on one item. Which was very different to what Kayle felt like on the previous season, where if you died once or twice in the early game, you got punished for having a lack of range, a lack of CC, a lack of utility, and you just got shot out of the game until like 3 items. But that just isn't the case anymore. And on top of that, as soon as you get Nash's and Rift Maker, you become an absolute demon lord. And you heal, you're a little bit more durable, you have more ability power, and on top of that, you have this ridiculous damage passive that gives you true damage for an extended period of time while in combat. So, Between all these changes, Kayle is in a very good spot now. It will be interesting to see how this change or this nerf to a passive affects her viability. But again, within this patch, there are more things that will affect Kayle's viability because of the nerfs to Nash's and Riff Maker. So we'll touch on Kayle a few times within these patch notes. Now, Samira. I love seeing Samira getting nerfed because that champion is just bullshit. I mean, I don't say this often, but I believe Riot really screwed up with Samira, so very happy to see that Samira's getting some more nerfs here. Passive melee blade bonus damage ratio decreased. Dash range against immobilized enemies also decreased. So, went from 10% to 7.5%, which, you know, again, the fact that she can both thrive in low range and high range is pretty ridiculous to me, so that's very fitting. It went from 800 to 1,000 to 650 to 950. Again, I still think this kit is very overloaded. I'm unsure about how this is going to affect her kill threat within the early lane, but as far as mid-game goes, I think she's going to be completely fine. So again, nerf Samira, please, Riots, or at least change the kit. Now, Tryndamere. Tryndamere is basically a dead champion. You know, I don't like talking about Tryndamere because the kit is just outdated. It doesn't really have a place at all. And the only time you see it in solo queues is with some random one trick. You know, compare Tryndamere's kit with something like a Fiora or a Camille or a Set or an Ornn. It's like, come on, man. But anyway, Q bonus AD increase and bonus AD per 1% missing health increase. Again, I don't play top lane. I don't play Tryndamere, so I know 100% we're not going to see it in competitive, but as for top lane meta, we'll have to see how this affects the way his matchups pan out, but I can't imagine it being a very big difference. Now, Varus, very interesting. Let's actually go through, there's actually quite a few changes here. Now, Piercing Arrow. Cooldown is no longer reduced by 3 seconds if Piercing Arrow detonates on blighted enemy. Damage from blight effects detonated with Piercing Arrow are now increased by the amount of time Varus charges it up for up to 50%. Interesting. In addition to increasing Piercing Arrow's damage for up to 50%. Interesting. Piercing Arrow will now show crit text when fully charged. Okay. Blighted Quiver on the W went from 7 to 21, from 7 to 11. That's a significant nerf. But detonating a blight stack on enemy champions and epic monsters now reduces all basic cooldowns by 12% of the max cooldown per stack. Now that's very interesting. Now the reason this is actually quite relevant for Varus is because his cooldowns are very high. So whenever you have a high cooldown or high base cooldowns on a champion, they get a lot of value from just CDR in general. So this is very interesting, and this may increase his effectiveness in bot lane, definitely. I don't think we'll see him in mid lane because of the amount of assassins that are in the meta right now. We did see Varus occasionally in the mid lane as a response to things like Azira and a lot of high range control mages, but we're just not in that meta anymore, so I don't think this is going to affect his viability mid lane. And then, Chain of Corruption. Varus now snaps to face the target direction on start of cast. Okay. Missile speed is actually being reduced. That's actually quite significant, which will actually decrease his level of threat in the bot lane at level 6. So, overall, nice little interesting changes. It'll be interesting to see maybe if Varus comes back in the meta, given we are seeing a lot of Ashe, and Ashe is quite similar to Varus in a lot of ways, where it has a lot of utility and gets pressure due to having a decent amount of wave clear. So, interesting. I don't really know how this affects the meta, but interesting changes. Now, some significant changes here with Yasuo and Yonei. We really need to read this through and have a think about how this is going to affect itemization for these two champions. Now, passive crit doubling now takes place after Rage Blade's on-hit calculations. This is very meaningful because obviously, you know, the amount of crit impacted how much damage you were getting with Rage Blade, and because you got the double crit with Yasuo and Yonei, it made Rage Blade incredibly very, very strong item. So Yasuo's double crit chance was so powerful with Rage Blade, the only correct choice was to build it first in every situation. This change addresses that excessive synergy. For full transparency, given the interactions like this one we've run into so far, we're currently targeting the next patch for a change that will cause Rage Blade to remove crit chance from users rather than just prevent crits. If you were wondering whether you would have to learn Rage Blade style to keep playing Yasuo in preseason, the answer is no. Okay, the reason this is meaningful, guys, is because the Rage Blade build path for Yonei, this on-hit specifically for Yonei, allowed him to spike much earlier than he would have otherwise if he were to go down the crit route. So crit, because of the changes to crit and how crit works as a scaling stat, it generally becomes meaningful after your third crit item. So you spike on 3 items. But now with this, what was the on-hit build path, you were spiking pretty hard. First of all, just on the Rage Blade as a 1-item spike, and then really hard on the 2-item spike with the Rage Blade into Shield Bow. So this is very meaningful. Now, this actually leads me into a whole nother rant about where I see Yonei in the future. Okay, I'm not really going to comment on Yasuo because I think Yasuo is going to be Yasuo and he's always going to be around. But Yonei is going to change a lot. Now, the way I view Yonei specifically is that I think his kit, just the design of the kit, is very strong. And I think we'll see it a lot in competitive play. Now, because his build path is altered, we may even see Kraken Slayer into BT. We may even see Shield Bow into PD because PD is actually cheaper now. We'll get to that later. I don't know. We're going to see some iteration of these two potentially. But what this will mean is that, and this is exactly what happened way earlier on when Yasuo eventually came out, is that every single time Yasuo got nerfed, people were like, oh, it's the end of Yasuo, the champion's dead. But no, people figure out a way to make it viable because the kit is so loaded. It has such a high skill cap. What this will mean is that the really bad Yonei players that were just abusing how OP this champion was, like press E, slam my head on the keyboard, take a really good trade, pop back, and they can't do anything. Now you've got to be a lot more careful with, okay, my wave management. How I'm going to stay healthy in the lane so I don't just get one shot. How can I ration out my resources or my HP? How can I guess, farm in a way that can allow me to be very efficient and get to my key item spikes. You've got to be very careful with the way you use your E. You have to be very careful with the way you use your W to soak up damage, and your mechanics have to be very high in order to actually minimize to get to these key item spikes. So I'm very hopeful. I think we're just going to see a lot more, I would say, higher skill cap, we're going to see a lot higher skill cap Yonei players, and I think that the bad Yonei players are going to get weeded out. And if you are to play this champion, you're going to really have to focus on champion mastery in order to make it work. So I'm very hopeful. I think the champion is still going to be good. It's just going to have a lot of weaknesses within the early game, which we're going to have to try and find out creative ways in order to cover them. So that's where I'm at right now with Yonei. So I'm actually going to do a video on Yonei because I'm learning him right now in the off season. So stay tuned if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Yonei. Now for some of the items. Blade of the Ruin King. So Blade of the Ruin King here, total cost gone up by 100 and actually reducing the attack speed by 5. Blade of the Ruin King is overperforming compared to the other legendaries it competes with, dropping its power to make it look more in line with the others. I think that's quite fitting. This also may mean that we see, or champions mid that we're building at like set mid, may just completely skip it now and go maybe the full tank route, or even just go Gore Drinker into something else. But yeah, I think that's quite fitting. Cosmic Drive, an extra 5 AP. I don't think this is overly meaningful. I mean, I thought that this item, I said this in my itemization video, where I thought the item was quite weak, and it wasn't good enough comparatively to the other items. But it makes sense given my prediction. Demonic Embrace. Now, this is weird to me, okay? This is similar to the Amumu changes. Right? What I said before with Amumu was that the changes weren't because Amumu was strong himself, but it was because of how he interacted with the other items. This is the way I feel about Demonic Embrace. I don't think this item is good on its own, and even if you look at the numbers on it, it doesn't feel that strong, and it is very much a niche item. But because of how much we are seeing like Riff Maker, and we're seeing all these tanks that are actually building Demonic Embrace, and the effectiveness of Sunfire Aegis and things like that, we're seeing a lot more demonic Embrace than we should. So I think nerfing this item doesn't make sense to me. I think the nerf should be directed at the key contributing items that are making this item viable in the first place. Like, I think it's in a decent spot, and I'm not okay with this change, and I don't think it's where the changes should be made. So it is what it is. It's going from 1.5% max HP magic damage every second for 4 seconds to 1.2 max health magic damage every second for 3 seconds. Again, really not happy with this change, and it is what it is, but I didn't think the item was that good in the first place. It's only good because of all the other items. So we'll see how this changes the build path moving forward, because we were seeing a lot on even champions like Akali, second item with Riff Maker and things like that, but interesting. Now, Eclipse. I have a lot of problems with Eclipse, alright? Eclipse, to me, doesn't seem like it fits in League of Legends. It feels like a Dota item. Like, let's actually take a look at the stats, right? It has AD, it has Lethality, and it has Omnivamp, right? You look at these 3 stats, you're like, okay, not bad. Early game item with a bit of Omnivamp, bit of AD, not too bad. Has a pretty clear identity. If you look at the other lethality items, they make sense. It's like, okay, I can see why I would build this item and what champions would want this item and in what situations. But then if you take a look at the passives on it, what else it has? It grants movement speed. It grants percent max HP damage. It grants a shield. And the Mythic passive also gives percent armor pen. Alright? What the hell, man? Like, it literally fits every situation. Early game, mid game, late game, into squishies, into tanks, into people stacking HP. Like, what does it not do good into? And for me, we're seeing champions like Lucian build this item. Like, that's when, like, come on, man. Like, this is a little bit weird to me. And I don't think this change of, like, adding, like, 2 seconds to the melee and, like, 4 into the range, like, is that really going to change this item's effectiveness? In my opinion, no. I think something needs to be changed with, like, the identity of the item. Like, I feel like this is kind of like Samira. Like, what niche or identity is Samira? Like, Samira ticks every box. And that's kind of how I feel with Eclipse. So, I think we will see more nerfs with this item in the future. Now, I'm not going to touch on the jungle items. I'm not a jungler. I don't really know how this changes things, so I'm just going to leave that for now. Essence Reaver, giving an extra 10 AD. Now, Essence Reaver is kind of not really recognized. I mean, a lot of the champions that previously built it aren't in the meta, or they just are going differing build paths. I can't really comment. I mean, I don't know how this is going to affect things. My hunch is that it's not really going to change much, because the other champions that build it, like Lucian, Corki, maybe like some other champions, like, I don't think they're really going to come up or like drastically alter their build path to build it now. So, nice change, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be meaningful for the meta. Now, this is a significant change with Kraken Slayer. 5 AD, extra 5 on the Wormfall and Sacrifice attack damage. Damage ratio has gone up from 30% AD to 45% AD. And now Grinzu's Rage Blade now probably triggers at all ranges when the holder also has Kraken Slayer. Okay, so that was a bug that they had to fix. Now, given the changes to the Rage Blade, I think we may see this potentially as a first item on champions like Yonei and into like a BT second item. And I think this definitively makes this the stock standard AD item in the bot lane. So overall, these are nice changes. I think we are going to see a lot more priority put onto this item. Really like it. Now, Liandry's. This is a change I am not happy with whatever. Come on, man. This item I thought was in a good spot. It had a very clear identity. If we think about Liandry's in the past, what did it do? You know, it gave you damage or incentivized you to be in combat for an extended period of time to make use of the passive, the Torment passive, but it had HP, which made sense, right? Because HP allows you to be in combat for a longer period of time, or at least soak through the initial burst damage. But now, this Liandry's, yes, it gives a lot of damage, but it has no HP. This has an obvious weakness. This is why we weren't even seeing this item much, especially at the higher levels of play, because it requires 2 items to be viable. You need another item that gives HP in order to make it work. Like, even champions that really love this item, like Liandry's, a lot of players weren't even building it, even at the high level, because they realized, I'm just too squishy. I just die. I have no HP. So this says to me that, I mean, I don't know. Yes, some champions like Bran and shit like that, like, got a lot of value from this item. But I don't think that's where you should be directing your attention. I mean, the item has a clear identity. Don't screw with it. It has obvious weaknesses and obvious strengths. Players should just be better at punishing the weaknesses of this item. So, again, I'm annoyed about this. This just feels like, Riot are just maybe listening to the League community too much and not sticking with their guns. I don't know. Personally, I'm not a fan of this. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments about that. Now, Lich Brain, again, an item that has been thinned out similar to Nash's, which gives it a very clear identity of being a very burst-oriented, high-damage item. I think it's very good, even with the reduction of the damage ratio going from 50% to 40%. I still think we're going to see it a lot within the meta, especially on champions like Victor, Echo, Fizz, things like that, in combination with how effective Rocket Belt, Night Harvester is. Very solid item, and I like it. I like the changes. It gives it a very clear identity, and I think we're still going to see it around. Again, another change that just doesn't make sense to me. Luden's really wasn't that strong. I mean, if it was that strong, how come we were seeing so much Rocket Belt, Night Harvester, Riff Maker? We're seeing like every other item or AP Mythic apart from Luden's Tempest. Yes, champions like Orianna felt quite nice with it, or the Syndra, or sometimes a little bit of Zoe, but it gave them a quite a nice little, it was a nice little niche item. This says to me, I mean, this doesn't make sense to me. I mean, okay, we're reducing the AP on the percent AP on the echo damage ratio, and we're also reducing the movement speed by 15%. I mean, come on, how are you trying to tell us to just not build this item at all? Like, alongside the tier buffs that later on I'm going to touch on, like, I think Ludens is going to die, and what people are going to actually do is they're actually just going to go tier off a tempo base and go straight into, like, another item, either Night Harvester, or they're going to go Riff Maker. That's what's going to happen. Like, people aren't going to go this item anymore. They're going to get their mana from tier, and they're just going to skip it completely and go into one of these better items. Because these items are objectively better, right? They give more burst, they give ability haste, they scale nicer because this has flat magic pen, and this one gives omnivamp. So, overall, Ludens might be dead after this. I mean, I'm not going to say it's dead, but it is significantly weaker. And I'm even going to be trying on Orianna and a lot of these control mages, things like Zoe, Vel'Koz, Victor, not Victor, Victor will probably still build it, but some of the other more scaling-oriented champions, I think they're just going to be going tier into Night Harvester or some other weird creative build path. I might be wrong, I might be reading into it too much here, but that's my initial hunch, and to be honest, I did not think that this item was too strong. Skip over Moonstone. Nash's, okay, now, so Nash's, again, a very strong item with a clear identity, a Cathian bite damage ratio from 25% AP to 20%. Again, I think it's a very strong item, and I think we're still going to see it has a clear identity. I don't think this change is going to be overly meaningful, but it's quite nice because the item's very strong. Now, Night Harvester. Night Harvester and Rockabelt are contributing to some of the high burst scenarios that we were looking to tone down from 175 to 250 to 125 to 200. I would say it's justified, but I think that this item is still going to be picked up because it gives you an amazing team fight damage because you can proc it on every single member in the team fight. Gives you ability haste on the Mythic passive, and a nice little bit of durability. And that's actually something I did not mention earlier on, guys, is that the problem with building Ludens is that you get no durability. You get no HP. And because we're in a very high burst oriented meta, not having any durability as any control mage, you just get one shot by like a Fizz or an Echo or a Zed or a Kiana. That's why I really like, if you can, if possible, go the Night Harvester or Rockabelt route. It's just better because you have durability. That's also why champions like Twisted Fate just can't build Ludens because you have no durability. So, yeah, these items are just straight up better than Ludens across the board. So I think these are fitting changes, but we're still going to see a lot of Night Harvester. The item is still good. Rockabelt, again, from 200 to 300 to 175 to 250. Significant changes, but again, what makes Rockabelt quite a strong item is the burst damage, the durability, and also the movement speed on the passive, which is quite nice with Rockabelt. So the champions that did build Rockabelt are still going to build it, whether it's Twisted Fate, whether it's Galia, any of these gap-closing champions. Now, PD, gone from 2900 to 2700, and they've increased the Spectral Waltz duration by a second. So this may be a build, an item that we build within Yonei's build path, because it's a relatively cheap legendary item that gives crit. So we may see this as a third item or even a second item on Yonei, unsure at this point in time. Prowler's Core, I don't think these changes really do anything, purely because the champions that build this item are still going to build it, and the champions that didn't really like this item, the changes aren't significant enough to make it viable. So again, nice little niche item that fills its role. Now, Riff Maker. Bringing Riff Maker down to the power of other mythics to maintain the mythic choice structure. Void corruption damage. Gone from 3% per second, max 15%, to 2% per second, max 10%. Now, this is a pretty significant change to Riff Maker, and I think it's quite justified because the item is very strong because of everything else it gives as well. Like, not only a ridiculous amount of damage to this Void Corruption passive, but also it gives Omnivamp, it gives durability, I believe it gives ability haste, don't quote me on that, and it gives ability power. So, across the board, given how strong the champions are at abusing this one, and the main reason, guys, this item is so strong. I was actually talking to one of my pro player friends about this, and he was saying the champions that were building this item, they go into the side lane, and let's just say you're playing a champion like, you know, a Kali or something like that. You not only don't have any mana problems because you work off energy, but now with how easy it is and how effective this item is for a champion like a Kali, you just can't shove them out of the side lane. Even on Leeching Leer, like the component of Leeching Leer is actually one of my favorite items in the game right now. So even with this nerf, it wouldn't surprise me if we still see maybe like tier into Riff Maker on champions like Cassio, and maybe even some other more sustained damage champions. So across the board, solid item, and I think a quite justified nerf for Riff Maker. Now, Serpent's Fang, okay, increasing the damage on that, not that meaningful, is what it is. Now, tier changes, very big. Now, this is actually huge. So it was 150 to 450. Now, we've got to keep in mind that the tier changes have to be remembered in the sense that it's harder to stack up a tier because you can't just stack it out of combat. Like, you know, when you're playing Cassio, you could just queue the ground on the way back to lane, same as Orianna. But you can't do that anymore. It has to be on an enemy. So now, what, you know, tier used to take, it used to take around between 15 to 20 minutes to actually stack up. Now it's going from 240 to 360, which is actually only a 120 difference. So it's going to take a much shorter time to stack up the tier. And it gives you a higher base amount of mana when you initially buy it. So I believe this is very, very big, and is also tying in or backs up my theory that we're going to see a lot more early tier bases into items like Night Harvester or Rocket Belt or even Riff Maker. We're going to see less Ludens and more of these items in combination with tier. Now, you shouldn't be upgrading to Archangels before it's actually fully stacked up. So given how fast it takes, I mean, I'll need to test this myself. But Archangels on some champions will be a solid second item. For others, will be a solid third item. And I even go to the extent, throw this out there, we may even see it on champions like Orianna, Syndra, and Zoe. They may not just go Ludens anymore and just go tier into Rockabelt or tier into Night Halves or anything like that. Or we might even see it creatively on APTF. I'm unsure at this point in time. And to compensate for the change in the max mana, they're also increasing the mana on Archangels, Seras, Manamune, and Murumana. Really solid changes. So all of the people that were struggling with mana, this is a blessing from the gods. Now, mid lane minion changes. Mid lane cannon minions now give 10 less gold, and mid lane cannon minions now gain 30% increased attack speed against towers. Now, I don't want to read too much into this because I don't think it's overly meaningful, especially the gold. I think this is only a significant change for lower elos, because in low elos, say like silver, gold, low plat, mid laners make incredibly inefficient roams, and they're okay losing like waves and losing tower plates. In high elo, you just don't see those inefficient roams because they understand the consequence of losing 2 tower plates mid to an inefficient roam. So I don't think this change is really meaningful in high elo. It allows lower elo players to punish inefficient roams. Like when you see that noob Talon player who goes bot, loses 2 or 3 waves and loses 2 plates, it's going to make it much easier for these players to punish them. Which, you know, makes sense, but not a massive change. Now, a behavioral systems update. As we wrap up the year, we've also wrapped up the early surrender and LP constellation projects. If there is an AFK player detected on your team after the 10-minute mark, a surrender vote can now occur. For now, this change will only apply to Summoner's Rift, and the vote must be unanimous. If the vote isn't unanimous, at the 15-minute mark, the team can vote again, now only needing a majority vote. Interesting. If a player on your team leaves during a ranked match or is detected as AFK, your LP loss may be reduced. I love it. These are awesome changes. Thanks, Rito. Pre-mage with a disconnect AFK provisional players and players in promotion series will not receive this loss reduction. Okay, makes sense. Some icon improvements, thank God. Some VFX and SFX updates, very important. So we're just going to skip over them. ARAM changes, very important, and we're also going to skip over them. Some bug fixes, you can go over them in your own time, won't go over them. And what a coincidence, Riot are giving you a nice, sexy Anivia skin right in time for that proposed Anivia change on patch 10.24 or hotfix later on potentially, or even patch 10.25. There were proposed Anivia changes. And if those changes go through, like Mark Yetta said, I think Anivia is going to be a pain in the absolute ass to deal with. So how convenient, money-making machine Riot know how to drain my wallet. So what we're going to do now is go into the tier list, so stay tuned, guys. So what we're going to do now, guys, is go through my take on the current mid lane tier list, and I've actually approached this in a bit of a different way. I've actually compartmentalized it into strong, solid, average, but can still be strong if picked correctly, interest me the most, weaker on this patch, and then unsure, need more time to see the meta unfold. And keep in mind, this is more the strength of champions on patch 10.23, And given there were changes, a lot of significant changes in 10.24, this may change a little bit, so you can use that knowledge you now have about 10.24 to guess what will go weaker, what will become stronger. But this is really the meta as it stands right now. So anyway, let's actually start from the top. So Akali, Kayle, and Victor are my three, or what I believe to be the three strongest mid lane champions on that patch. I would say Akali is very strong because of build diversity and also the changes to Presence of Mind, which have really benefited her. Against squishy compositions, she can go Night Harvester into Lich Brain and actually just demolish squishy champs. She can also go into tankier comps, Riff Maker into like Demonic Embrace and be an absolute menace in extended team fights. She just has a lot of flexibility in the way she can approach games. I would say Kayle as well with the changes to Nash's, introduction of Riff Maker into the game, and also the buff she received on 10.23, and then also she still has that slight buff on 10.24, which still gives her bonus attack speed per ability power, really give her, I would say, less powered troughs and spike much earlier into the game. I would say Victor is stronger for a multitude of reasons. I would say the changing of the way the hex cores actually work give you a lot more flexibility in the way you play your early lane. Like, you don't get punished for going back for an early base. You also can build lootings, which gives you movement speed, which means that you don't necessarily have to take phase rush. And on top of that, because you get rewarded for playing aggressively, because you get your hex cores much faster if you get solo kills, you get rewarded for taking a more aggressive route within the early laning phase, whether it's Electrocute, Airy, or Comet. So overall, I believe these three champions are the strongest on the current patch. Now, other solid champions. We have Fizz, Set, Echo, Galia, Silas, and Twisted Fate. Now, I'll start with Twisted Fate because many of you may think, oh, what the hell, why Twisted Fate here? I believe Twisted Fate is also strong for a similar reason to Akali, in the sense that he has a lot of build diversity. He can go AD when you're versing a lot of AP-oriented champions because of the effectiveness of Triforce into Wit's End. You can also go the AP setup, which is great into AD champions, where you go Rocket Belt into Seekers, and Seekers, I believe, is in a very good spot right now, and turn that into a Zhonya's. And then you can also go the Rocket Belt setup if you are versing very squishy-oriented team comp, because the gap closer Rocket Belt gives you with the movement speed really unlocks his kit, and on top of that, it's great into just very squishy compositions overall. And the Triforce into Wits End build is also very good into tankier oriented teams, and you can alter your build path to shred tanks. So that's actually a video I'm going to do, probably my next video, talking about AD and APTF and how it works, how you need to change your build path, the way you need to play the early lane differently and things like that. So stay tuned, but I do think TF is actually in a pretty solid spot right now. Now, Silas, you may think, again, he's quite weird, but again, right now, he just feels strong. His Q does a lot of damage, and he, again, has a lot of build path diversity. I think that people don't know how to build him correctly yet. We're seeing a lot of differing builds. We're seeing Everfrost into Nash's from Nemesis. We're seeing Liandry's into Zhonya's. We're seeing Night Harvester into Zhonya's. We're seeing Night Harvester into Cosmic Drive. We're seeing a lot of different builds, and given how much, or how I'll say how uncertain people are about Silas' build path, he's still very strong. And he does quite solid into a lot of the champions that are in the meta right now. So overall, I think Silas is in a very good spot. Galia, again, because of effectiveness with Rocket Belt, Fizz and Echo for obvious reasons, with the buffs to Lich Brain and Night Harvester being a great item, as well as Rocket Belt. And set mid is something I believe to be strong that I think not many people have been abusing yet, but because of the lack of mana in the meta and how burst oriented the meta is as well, Set can really just counter a lot of these burst oriented champions. And if you take Fleet and Second Wind, you're really hard to bully in the early laning phase. So overall, I think Set mid will make a return, and I'm unsure about the build path. I think there are a lot of options as well, whether you go Gore Drinker or Divine Syndra, or you go full tank with Sunfire Aegis. I'm unsure right now. Even Chem Tank item. I think there are a lot of options, but my hunch is that Set is very strong right now, and even a lot of the pros are dabbling with that champion. Now, the next row here is average, but still can be strong if picked correctly. Yonei, I believe, was very strong with the Rageblade setup. Even with the changes to Rageblade, I think he will still be strong if played correctly. I think he's countered very hard by champions like Akali and Fizz and a lot of burst-oriented champions. But if he's not getting countered and he's actually picked later in the draft and he knows he's versing some, like, you know, control mage, I think he can get a lot done and scale nicely into the mid to late game. And I think the champion or the kit is just quite overloaded, and I think we're going to see it a lot within the competitive season in Season 11. Orianna, I think the kit again is just very solid. Yes, the nerfs to Ludens will hurt her, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see her more again with tier into Night Harvester or something like that. But again, I think the kit, because of how low the cooldowns are, and how low the mana costs are, your ability to adapt to any game base just makes this champion just quite strong. Cassio, I put that on the fringe as a niche little pick here. I think some games it gets obliterated, especially when you're versing like a lot of burst. But then in some games when you're versing a lot of tanks, you can go tier into Riff Maker. You can even go tier into Leandras, into Archangels. You can get a lot of work done. So I couldn't really put it below this. I still think it has a place in the meta. Katarina, I think it's quite solid. Zed, similar reasons. Lethality, it's the same with Kiana. I think the build paths for all of these champions allow it to thrive in the current patch. Now, interests me the most. This is very interesting. There are a wide range of champions I've put in here, so bear with me. Let's actually just start with Lucian. I think Lucian as a kit just belongs in the mid lane. And yes, I think we're struggling to figure out what his build path is right now, but it's only a matter of time until we figure out how to optimize his build path in order to make him viable again. I think the champion is just solid, just from a kit perspective, kind of similar to Yonei. It's just more of like a matter of time of when it will come back into the meta. Scion, similar to set mid, we are in a very burst-oriented meta, and with the strength of Sunfire Aegis, I think that the rise of tank mids could actually just come about. I think we just could see it. So I'm just putting it there as a very interesting pick I'm keeping my eye on because, you know, it generally does come back into the meta at some point in time. Annie is a champion that, again, is interesting me. I think she has so many options with her build path, and I think any champion that has the ability to adapt their build to whatever's in the game interests me. So I don't know what the most optimal build path is for Annie. That's something I still got to figure out, and I'll test with time to come. But it is a champion I'm keeping my eye on, and especially with the tier changes, we might see tier into Night Harvester, we may see tier into Rocket Belt, rather than having to go into Ludens for the extra mana with Lost Chapter. So definitely a champion I'm keeping my eye on as well. Let's skip forward here. I would say Azira is strong as a champion, but just doesn't fit in the meta right now, given how much bursts exist. Like, imagine you're playing Azira, and you verse like a Maokai with an Echo. Like, what the fuck are you going to do? Like, Maokai jumps on you, then Echo jumps on your face as well, and then twerks on your head. You're not really going to be able to do much. So I think he's on the cusp. We just got to wait and see the meta really pan out. But it wouldn't surprise me if we still see it in competitive play. Asol interests me because of that Imperial Mandate and Rylai setup. I don't know if that's just a niche gimmick or if it's genuinely strong. That's something I'm keeping my eye on. Now, if we do see the rise of the tank meta and this very lack of engage, we're seeing champions with very little engage, Victor, Kale, even like some of these other champions have a lack of engage. It wouldn't surprise me if we see Vel'Koz, Ziggs, and Kog'Maw rise in priority because of their tank shred and how good they are against a lack of engage. But again, that I might just be pipe dreaming at this point in time. But I am keeping an eye on them if we do start to see a lot of these tank-oriented mid laners. Now, going on a little bit deeper here, weaker on this patch. These are all champions that I believe was, you know, might have been stronger in Season 10, or maybe they were or weren't strong. I just think they're weaker objectively. Lissandra, because of the Presence of Mind changes. Rise with the mana changes. Again, Nocturne with the Tiamat and Presence of Mind changes. And Nivea with the tier changes and Presence of Mind changes. Although this may change with the rework that will come through. And Rise as well with the tier changes may affect his viability and increase his viability. Again, Talia with how Ludens feels a little bit underwhelming. Plus GLP getting removed. Plus Presence of Mind. Talon, again, Tiamat kind of killing him. Kassadin for the similar reasons, which removal of Rod of Ages, that's the same as these two champions, removal of Rod of Ages as well. I think that they're just objectively weaker than where they were. GLP being removed for Veigar was a big kick in the nuts. Syndra feels weaker. Not really because of the items, more because of the meta. Just absolutely, like, the champions that love Lich Brain just obliterate Syndra. Like, you look at Echo, you look at Fizz, and even like some of these other champions like Zed can give Syndra a really hard time. Maybe we may see Syndra rise in priority with the tier build. But again, I'll say objectively she is weaker than Season 10. Zillion really struggles at the moment. Similar reasons to all these other champions. And then Corki, again, just gets destroyed by Burst. So these two champions, again, just get obliterated by the Burst meta we're in. Now, there's a lot of champions down the bottom here that I'm unsure of, and I don't know where they fit, and I need more time. I would say a few that I'm looking at. Seraphine, it wouldn't surprise me if we do see Seraphine in competitive play, But the weakness of Seraphine is that it just takes too long to scale, and you do very much just get countered by these assassins. Like, you're using a Zed or a Fizz, an Echo, all these champions. Like, you're just going to struggle. You're too squishy in the early game, and I don't think you can really survive or without giving too much pressure. So, overall, I can see it coming up eventually, but just not right now. I would say Swain is interesting to me. I haven't had the opportunity to try it, but with all the Battle Mage items in the game, wouldn't surprise me if Swain rises in priority. Leblanc, I'm unsure. I haven't had the opportunity to test it. Leblanc is usually like a counter meta pick. It's not really something that defines a meta. So I think it will depend on what we see unfold over the next month to really see how powerful Leblanc is. Other champions, Ahri, unsure. Maybe with Horizon's Focus and Cosmic Drive, we may see some builds. I've also seen Imperial Mandate with Rylai's on Ahri. Again, unsure about how effective it is. And there are a bunch of other champions that I'm unsure, that I need more testing, and we need to see the meta unfold before we can really fit them in. And another one, actually, I will mention Diana. Diana's interesting because it feels like at the end of Season 10, she didn't really have an identity. And now with the items like Night Harvester, there's also the options to go more of a sustain build. I think that she can either go burst or the sustain path much more effectively than she used to be able to. So Diana is a champion that's on my radar. I still think she won't really be viable in high elo, but in low elo I think she will be a lot more viable, although the presence of mind changes do affect her a little bit. I think we'll just probably see her as more of like a burst oriented champion, maybe taking mana flow. Or we might just see it with like absolute focus, Gathering Storm with Electrocute, and just build like Night Harvester into like a Lich Brain and just play full burst. I'm unsure, but she is a champion that's on my radar. So overall, this is where I'm at right now. This may change with patch 10.24 with the changes to Riff Maker, some changes to Nash's and Kale's nerf, things like that. But overall, I think it will largely stay the same. And it'll be very interesting to see which direction Riot will go in for patch 10.25. So hopefully this gives you at least a little bit of a rough gauge on the strength of champions right now, and I'd love to hear back from you guys in the community. So thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Cheers.